Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. I was distracted by my Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold, one of the few truly free and open phones as of recently. If you've been around for a bit, you know that I've been really invested in the Tim Sweeney cases against both Google and against Apple. I think Epic had a really good case against both companies because they do a lot of sketchy shit with their marketplaces and how software is distributed. To this day, the hardest part of building an iPhone app is actually getting the app on your iPhone and then getting Apple to approve it. Apple makes a lot of the other parts hard too, to be clear, but those two parts are absurdly difficult because Apple doesn't really have to care about making it better, and they also act really anti-competitively about it. The fees that both iOS and Android take when you sell things on their app stores are absurd. We're talking 30% fees. So if you subscribe to me on Twitch through the App Store, Apple gets more money than Twitch does, which is crazy. It makes all of these margins not work. It makes everything fall apart. It's really, really bad. And as I'm sure all of you can imagine, none of these companies want to allow third-party app stores because that breaks their entire ecosystem into pieces. At least that's how it was. Android's always been open source. How open source can be debated as the way that they build it and release it has changed over the years, and what parts are and aren't included in Android has shifted too. But overall, Android is open source and historically has allowed you to install your own applications, including app stores. And on one hand, it seems like they're tripling down on that now as a result of this court case. The Android dev team just published a new blog post, a new era for choice and openness. And in many ways, this absolutely is that. But in parallel, there's a new initiative called Keep Android Open that is concerned Android is becoming more closed due to some changes in who is allowed to build and distribute applications. I want to do my best to cover all of this, both the changes that are happening now and the changes in the future that many devs are concerned about, and what this means for Android long term. I know I'm the Apple guy. I know you guys expect that from me, but believe it or not, I used to be a hardcore Android fanboy and used to be very involved in like the custom ROMs and hacking and all that stuff. It was very fun for me. I've always really liked it. Like, do you know how badly I wanted this to be my daily phone? I tried so hard. And I might have to try again because what's going on with Android is really cool. But do you know what you should try? Today's sponsor. AI's gotten really good at building apps. Well, web apps at least. Once it comes to mobile, things get a lot messier. Even just trying to release the apps can be obnoxious. You want to take advantage of the cool things your phone can do, be it the AR side or the camera or all the other magical stuff embedded in the Swift bindings for your iPhone, you're kind of out of luck. Well, you were before Rourke Max dropped, because this is crazy. I'm actually genuinely blown away. I've been setting it up to play with for this ad, and I think I'm addicted. It's hilariously easy to make real applications with this. The one I made is a bit goofy, and you might notice that you can't really see it here. That's because I have it plugged into my phone. Rourke now ships a Mac app so that you can link your phone and your computer together as you use Claude code in the background, by the way, in order to build real native iPhone applications. This is a real Swift app that was built, and it wasn't even built on my machine. It was built in the cloud, and then they used their pipeline to put it on my phone when I'm working on it with my computer. The task I gave it here was not trivial. I asked it to build an app that uses the AR features in the camera on my phone to put a hat on my head. And it actually works. Like, what? It's kind of crazy that something like this is able to be done just playing around with a web app like this. You might notice the hat's in front of my head. That's not quite right. I asked it to fix that. Let's see if it's succeeded. You see, there's a little building button here in the corner, and I can tell it to rebuild and update the app on my phone directly. I also just want to say the onboarding is great. All of these types of little things that are really annoying to get right, it just tells you how to deal with them. And I've never had such a smooth setup doing an iOS thing in my life. Even official Apple stuff is significantly harder than this was. Holy shit, it actually worked. What? These are the types of things that just were not realistic for people to do if you didn't know iOS well. But you can build anything with this as far as I can tell. They've shown off everything from Subway Surfers clones to flight management apps to full-on Pokemon Go clones. You can use all of the things your iPhone is capable of doing, all of the APIs, all of the stuff that would normally be a blocker. But the biggest deal by far, 2 clicks to App Store. I am blown away with Rourke Max, and I bet you will be too. Check it out now at soydev.link/Rourke. Before we can go into all these new things happening, I think we need a little bit of history here. It's kind of crazy to think about in retrospect, but the App Store was a genuine revolution in software. It wasn't the first time there was a place you could go to download applications, but it was the first time there was a real successful operating system that people used every day that was that popular that only let you install software by going to the App Store. When the iPhone first came out, you could only use web apps. They were big proponents of HTML5, believe it or not. But the App Store was their attempt to let developers build native software in a way that prevented the thing they were most scared of, viruses. They wanted to have an ecosystem they could control so that they didn't have to worry about people's phones getting hacked and all of their personal data being at risk. As more and more people use their phone for more and more personal stuff, that was a real big concern. And to this day, there's never been a major iOS virus or hack that has meaningfully affected the iOS ecosystem. There's always going to be focused phishing attempts and crazy exploits that are sold for millions of dollars to target like world leaders and such. But generally speaking, you're not going to get a virus on your phone by going to the wrong website. And part of that was the App Store. And Apple absolutely designed the App Store around this goal. They wanted to go out of their way to make it as unlikely as possible that you could get bad software on your device. And they were willing to spend an absurd amount of money reviewing every single app that was being shipped to iPhones to make sure that was the case. That was also a crazy thing at the time. Before the App Store, software didn't really get verified by platforms. The same thing happened with gaming, where Nintendo was the first company to have a official Nintendo license you would want to put on your games that you had to get approval from Nintendo for. Before then, it was a free-for-all. And software historically had been a free-for-all like that. Once you bought your Windows computer, you could get a lot of software from a lot of different places, and it didn't really matter if Microsoft wanted you to have it or not, which was a huge security issue, but also allowed for a lot of incredible things to be made. The App Store flew in the face of that. One of the other big concerns Apple had here was payment processing. This has been a problem in software forever. In the good old freeware shareware days where you would get a free version of a program, then you'd mail a check to the software company or the house of the developer who built it. So he would mail you back a license or a floppy disk or a CD with the official version of that software. It was hellish. And then when devs started trying to process payments online, things got even more chaotic, even faster. Scams skyrocketed massively. Everything got tough. And Apple wanted to avoid that as well by introducing payment processing in the App Store, where you could buy an app through Apple on the App Store. Apple takes a 30% cut for providing the App Store, providing the reviews, all of the services they are doing here. You still get your 70%, and now you can sell apps in a way you never could before. I will make an argument that might sound contradictory to things I've said in the past, but I trust you guys to use your ears and listen and watch more than the first 5 minutes of a video before leaving a shitty comment. I see you scrolling to leave that shitty comment. Stop. Just use your ears, not your fingers, for a little bit. When the App Store was the only reasonable way to distribute software and charge for it on a massively popular platform, the fees they charged made sense. When this was a genuine revolution, when there was nothing like it, when it was the first time many developers, myself included, could ship software our friends could use that we could sell and make money from. This idea of like the App Store millionaire forming, all of that took a lot of effort and innovation and time from Apple. And charging a reasonable fee for that at the time made a lot of sense. Since then, everything's changed. Most software is acquired through the internet. There are dozens of different app stores on almost all platforms. Every Linux distribution has an app store that is as good, if not better, than Apple's App Store. Like, we're past this point. There's a lot of ways to get software. There's a lot of platforms that do software distribution. And most importantly, there are a lot of different ways to accept payments over the internet now, which was not the case before. So the 30% fees that Apple chose at the time have aged incredibly poorly. Stripe has become the world standard for doing payment processing. Stripe processes $1.4 trillion a year in payment volume as of 2024, which means they're almost 2% of global GDP goes through Stripe. Do you know how insane that is? 1.6% of global money goes through Stripe. Their fee is 2.9% plus 30 cents. That is significantly smaller than Apple's 30%. Stripe and Apple Pay do a similar amount of transaction data year over year, and they are only beat out by like Amex, MasterCard, PayPal, and Visa. Yeah. So that's a lot of information about App Store and payment processing. What does that have to do with Android? Well, as is the way with many things Google does, Android was largely just copy-pasting things that went well for Apple. The Google Play Store copied the 30% because it made sense. They just copied the thing that was being done by others. Cool. I see why they would do that. But this is not a number that makes sense in 2026. This is a number that made sense in the 2010s, but now that there's real competition for these things, no longer does. On iOS, this is a problem because you don't have other options. If you install an app from the App Store and you process payments with your own payment processor, like let's say I decided to have the T3 Chat mobile app come out on iOS, but we would still do subs through Stripe, Apple would ban you for that. You have to do the payment processing through Apple. They claim this is a way to protect their users, and in many ways it is, especially at the time. But now there's so many trusted ways to do payment processing that don't take these absurd fees. It hurts every time it happens. This is also why you might notice a lot of things are more expensive through the iPhone app than they are when you go to the website directly. Like subscribing on Twitter, doing YouTube Premium, all those types of things cost more on iOS simply because the app is forced to go through Apple Pay and is forced to give up their 30%. Unless it is a service being provided with physical goods or real world work. So Uber doesn't have to take these fees. Amazon doesn't have to take these fees unless you're buying digital goods. And there's a whole separate thing Apple and Amazon colluded on for that I could talk about for a long time. The Premiere Video partner thing was garbage. There's so many layers to this bullshit. But in the end, what it means is if you're building an indie game as a small developer on App Store, you're paying 30% of your income to Apple. But if you're making Bank of America or Amazon, you're paying almost nothing to Apple. Simply because the types of transactions they are doing are not covered by Apple's strict policy around needing to process payments through Apple Pay. So why are we here? We're here for a very silly reason. Fortnite. Fortnite is two things. Fortnite is obviously a really popular game that makes a lot of money for the company Epic Games that is owned by Tim Sweeney. But Fortnite is also a playground for Epic and a showcase of Epic's technology and where game dev is going. Fortnite was originally built to showcase a ton of their tools and also to prove that their engines were capable of doing really large numbers of players in the same server together, specifically because a certain PlayerUnknown Battleground was really popular at the time and was a total jank mess, and they wanted to make sure people didn't think that was because of Unreal Engine. Spoiler, it kind of was, but also kind of wasn't, and Fortnite ended up working out very well for them. It has gone way past a tech demo, but parts of how they think about it still are that. While Fortnite is a huge portion of Epic's income and it's absolutely a thing that they're thinking about and optimizing for, their goal is not to have Fortnite be the only game. In fact, their goal is to have Fortnite be the first of a new type of game in hopes that more developers will use Epic's tools to build other similar games. They wanted to prove what you can do with Unreal Engine 4 and now Unreal Engine 5 with this type of game as a service, all of the real-world integrations, the universe building, all of that. Fortnite is as much a demonstration to the industry of how big games can go as it is an actual game that makes money. Obviously, a 30% fee on all transactions happening on iOS and Android, which is a huge portion of Fortnite's player base, is a significant hit for Epic to take, as it is on Steam too, which is why they made the Epic Game Store. We'll touch on that more later, don't worry. Fortnite was forced to take these fees on iOS and Android, and they hated that. So Tim Sweeney decided to make a bold move. All the way back in 2020, Tim Sweeney decided to add a new button in Fortnite that would give you a 10% discount on your V-Bucks. You just had to use Epic's payment processing instead. So if you already had a credit card on your account from playing on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, and then you wanted to go buy some more V-Bucks, you could just click one button and do it in the app, and Apple would not get their fees because it's not going through Apple Pay. And they decided to reward you for that by giving you 10% off. They obviously are getting 20% more because they don't have to deal with the fees, but you get the idea. Apple immediately banned them, and they were prepared. They were prepared with one of the funniest videos that has ever been published by a company.
Today, we celebrate the anniversary of the platform unification directives. For years, they have given us their sons, their labor, their dreams. In exchange, we have taken our tribute, our profits, our control. This power is ours and ours alone. We shall prevail.
If you're young enough that you've never seen the original Apple version of this commercial, I highly recommend going to watch it. Having a parody of Apple's most legendary ad ready to go for the day you got banned from the App Store is such fucking 500 IQ, 5D chess bullshit that I knew from this moment Fortnite was going to come out on top, Epic would win, and Tim Sweeney was going to set a really good example for the whole industry. And I know this is crazy from the Apple fanboy that I'm defending a game I don't even play over a company whose stuff I have spent way too much money on that I rely on every day. But I'm absolutely team Sweeney in this one. The War of the Tims. It's annoying. I have supported this from day one. The payment processing fees are absurd, and Apple had clearly underestimated Epic, thinking that quickly banning their Apple account and making it harder for their developers to use Macs would be enough to stop them. And remember, this is two companies that have played very nice together historically. In fact, Fortnite's first gameplay reveal was on an Apple stage when they were revealing Metal at WWDC. So funny how the tides have turned over time, but it's important to know this context. Epic Games came prepared for war, and Apple thought they could do their usual thing of just quietly putting you out and letting you out to dry and slowly die over time. This ban probably cost Epic multiple billions of dollars in revenue because there was 5 years where you couldn't install Fortnite on iPhone. 5 years of no Fortnite on iPhone. That's crazy considering how much money it makes. And they chose to do that not because they knew the 30% was so important to them that having the app banned for so long was worthwhile. It's actually for a very different reason. The 30% fee does hurt Epic, but it hurts their customers more. Not just the gamers, but the game developers. Game developers are losing huge portions of their revenue on platforms like iOS and Android to companies like Apple and Google. And Tim hated that. His belief is that the best thing Epic can do is empower game developers to be more successful and build cooler things, and the App Store fees were hurting that. If you build a game with Unreal Engine and release it on iOS, Apple gets way more money than Epic does, which is absurd if you think about it. And that's why Tim declared war. As I mentioned before, Apple gravely underestimated Epic and their capability in this war and how much work they had done in order to do this. And as is always the case with Google, they did their usual thing, which was very poorly copy what Apple was doing. Not only did Google not send their best lawyers, they arguably sent some of their worst, because Epic went after both. The App Store case had a lot of back and forth. I have a really long video about the final ruling, and then afterwards, the judge cracking down on Apple for not honoring the letter of the law with it. That one was crazy. Definitely recommend that video. The Google one went much more in Epic's favor early on. With the Google case, the jury returned a unanimous verdict in favor of Epic, finding that Google engaged in exclusionary conduct in violation of antitrust laws due to 1, its restrictions on app distribution through the Play Store, and 2, its tying of in-app payments to Google Play billing. Following the December 2023 jury verdict, the district court issued a permanent injunction in October of 24, which the Ninth Circuit affirmed in July 2025. This one was crazy. I still can't believe some of these rulings went through. They are all things I'm in favor of, but they're brutal. The first one's the prohibition of anti-competitive arrangements. The injunction bars Google from continuing in certain conduct that was found to be anti-competitive by the jury. Specifically, if you're Samsung and you sell an Android phone, you only make money on the phone sale, and maybe if you're lucky and you trick someone into buying your headphones or something, you make a little bit more. With iOS, Apple makes money when you buy the phone and when you use the phone and when you give the phone to your kid when you upgrade your phone. Apple continues to make money on you because they own the store, the software, and the hardware. Samsung only owns the hardware, so they end up not having a great relationship with the customer long term because once you've bought the phone, they kind of hate you because all you can do as a Samsung user after buying a Samsung phone is cost them money. And this is why Android phones tended to fall apart so quickly because there was no incentive from the manufacturers to keep the phone working well. Google tried a lot of different things to work around that. One of the things they tried was revenue sharing. If you include the Google Play Store on your phone, instead of trying to sneak your own shitty app store in like many companies were in order to try and make some money, if instead you include a Google Play Store, Google would cut you a little bit of the revenue from apps purchased on your phones. This made it way more worth it for Samsung to include Play Store and continue making Android phones instead of doing their own weird bullshit. This also means that there is basically no incentive for a company like Samsung to include other app stores, especially if Google says it has to be the only store as part of this agreement. So your options are you include Play Store with our blessing, we give you 5% of revenue, or you include Play Store and, I don't know, Epic Store or Amazon Fire Store, whatever the weird Amazon App Store was. Include one of those, you get some paycheck from that company, but you no longer get any percentage of Google Play Store revenue. This massively hampered any chance of other app stores getting popular on Android. And this was ruled as anti-competitive, which is a ruling I absolutely can understand. I sympathize with Google's goal here, which is to make manufacturers maintain the ecosystem better and maintain their phones better. But at the same time, this makes it nearly impossible for other app stores and other alternative things to become relevant on Android. And that's not even the craziest part of this ruling. The craziest part is the catalog access. I think this is absurd, and I'm amazed this made it in. The injunction mandates that Google permits third-party Android app stores to access and themselves distribute the Google Play Store's catalog of apps, enabling rival stores to offer users a comparable library of software. That is a crazy ruling. Now, anyone who wants to spin up their own app store can just use the entire catalog of Android apps. That effectively makes it so the Play Store is the worst store in many ways. I still can't believe this one made it in, but it did, and here we are. They also had a distribution remedy for the App Store, mandates Google distribute third-party Android app stores through the Play Store, another really big deal. They are required to allow other app stores to be installed through Play Store to make it way easier to adopt these other stores. And they also established a technical committee to make sure that Google honors this ruling. This was brutal. Apple's case was bad. This is insane. This is effectively the death of the Google Play Store as we knew it, and I've been waiting to see what the long-term results would be. There was endless back and forth with Google trying to get this all overturned. Some parts were, some parts weren't. But after seeing how things went for Apple, I think they got scared. But I also think they kind of saw an opportunity here. An opportunity that they decided to take. And that's how we ended up here. A new era for choice and openness. Android's always driven innovation in the industry through its unique flexibility and openness. At this important moment being lawsuit, we want to continue leading the way in how devs distribute their apps and games to people on billions of devices across many form factors. A good old fold. A modern platform must be flexible, providing developers and users with choice and openness as well as a safe experience. Today, we're announcing substantial updates that evolve our business model and build on our long history of openness globally. We're doing that in 3 ways: more billing options, a program for registered app stores, and lower fees and new programs for developers. All things I am very much fond of. First, we have the expanded billing choices. Google Play is giving developers even more billing choice and freedom in how they handle transactions. And by even more, what they mean is instead of 0, they're giving you some. Mobile devs will have the option to use their own billing systems in their apps alongside Google Play billing, or they can guide users outside of their app to their own websites for purchases. Woo! Huge, huge deal. This is a thing that Apple has pushed back so hilariously hard on. In fact, when Facebook tried to just let users know about the fees, they almost got banned from iOS. This has been going on for a long time, where any attempt to inform users of things like, hey, you can go to our website to get a discount, or a link to let you go check out somewhere else, every one of those is risking your whole Apple account getting banned, and that is not a risk that many people want to take. The billing choices change is huge, and I am amazed that this is happening. It is way overdue. I hope that our friends over at Stripe are ready to go with a bunch of comms and documentation on how to take advantage of this in the near future. It's a really cool change. Speaking of really cool changes that we'll probably never see Apple do, the store choice changes. We're introducing a program that makes sideloading qualified app stores even easier. Our new registered app store program will provide a more streamlined installation flow for Android app stores that meet certain quality and safety benchmarks. Make sure you remember this certain quality and safety benchmarks thing. We'll be talking about this a lot later, both in the context of this change as well as Apple and some of their weird workaround things that aren't great. Once this change is rolled out, app stores that choose to participate in this optional program will have registered with us, and so users who sideload them will have a more simplified installation flow. This is the worst sentence I think I've ever read in my life. There's no way an AI wrote that. It would have made it readable. If a store chooses not to participate, nothing changes for them, and they retain the same experience as any other sideloaded app on Android. This gives app stores more ways to reach users and gives users more ways to easily and safely access the apps and games they love. A registered App Store program will begin outside of the US first, and we intend to bring it to the US as well, subject to court approval. I don't know if the court approval piece here is something outside of it complying with the case. My assumption is that this is part of the case. And when they say court approval, what they mean is the court approving this as remedying the action taken against them because of the case going in Epic's favor. On one hand, this is a great change. On the other, this can be seen as them following the letter of the law of the injunctions put on them with as much control in their hands as possible. The ruling said that they have to allow other stores to be distributed on their app store. This is them doing that, but with their certain quality and safety benchmarks. I'm sure that these will not be made public because of course they won't. This gives them the ability to effectively arbitrarily choose who should or shouldn't be allowed to distribute through the App Store. And I am positive they're going to take advantage of that. This is Google. They're going to. Not as badly as Apple did, which is the other thing I wanted to point out. Apple introduced a bunch of absurd benchmarks and verification processes for their third-party app stores in the EU that have prevented basically anything from happening there. Apple put all of these quality and safety benchmarks just to block developers from being able to use these rulings and in order to enforce this injunction. They might be using this to play dirty. I'm mostly saying that because Apple used this to play very dirty. So keep an eye on that, especially because later on we have to talk about keeping Android open. Very tied to this. Lower pricing and new programs to support developers. This is still part of the billing thing, but is very, very exciting. Google Play's fees are already the lowest among major app stores. In what way, sir? In what way? If by the lowest you mean tied for the two of them being the same, because the major app stores are iOS's App Store and your App Store, Play Store. So of the two, you are indeed the lowest, but you're also the highest because you both have the exact same fee. That is a lie. This is a bullshit statement to put in here. Nice try, Google. But today they're taking it even further. No, you're actually just doing the thing for the first time. But it's a new business model that decouples fees for using our billing system and introduces new, lower service fees. For developers who choose to use Google Play's billing system, they'll be charged a market-specific rate separate from their service fees. In the European Economic Area, the UK, the US, the rate will be 5%. But this is separate from the service fee. For new installs, so new apps that are being installed, first-time installs from users after the new fees are launched in a region. So a new user installing an app for the first time after these fees have been done, the in-app purchase fees are now down to 20%. Previously, they were 30, now they're 20, but there is this flat fee on top that will probably be between 5 and 10% depending on the region. Wait, no, it's if you use Google Play's billing system. Okay, so this fee is if you're using Google Play, and this one is the service fee. They might enforce this externally then. Interesting. In-app purchase service fees down to 20%, and we are launching an app experience program and revamping the Google Play Games Level Up program to incentivize building great software, yada, yada, yada. Devs who participate in these programs will have even lower rates. Participating IAP devs will have a 20% service fee for transactions on existing installs and 15% on transactions for new installs. The one really good thing in here, and this should be the case everywhere, recurring subs are down to 10%. They still charge a higher amount for the first month, I'm assuming, but once you get a user in a recurring sub, they won't take as big of a fee anymore. That is very good. Apple has a similar thing, but it only applies after the first year. I also think it's 15% fee, not 10% for that. They have some silly diagrams that are a bunch of percentages that don't really mean too much unless you overthink. For your first million in annual earnings, you used to pay 30%. Now you pay 15% plus that optional 5% Google Play billing fee. Okay, yeah, this confirms my suspicion that the 5% is what they charge for using Google Play for payments. And this 20% fee is something you have to pay regardless of how you're handling billing. Fun. I was hoping it would be the opposite. The 5% was mandatory and the 20% was for their store payment stuff. Nope, you're still paying them 20%. And this is also very strategic because app payments are often smaller amounts. So let's say you're paying $5. Let's evaluate different options. If you did this payment via Stripe on web, you need to take 3% as the fee plus the 30 cents. That puts you at a 45-cent fee, which is exactly 9%. Not bad. What if you paid with the old IAP policy? Well, that's $5 times 0.3 for the 30%, which is $1.50 of fees. Obviously, so that's 30%. Is 30%. That is a massive gap. That is a 3x. And as the cost goes up, if you make this $50 instead, the gap gets even bigger because the 30% flat fee is a very small flat fee. Well, let's look at this new policy. We'll assume new install just to give them the best case. It's 15% plus 5%. So that comes out to 20%, which is $1. A meaningful improvement. That is a huge decrease in what your fees look like. But remember, this first part is a mandatory fee. The second part is only if you use Play Store. So here's where things get sketchy. The new policy plus Stripe. If you want to use your own billing platform and you bring that in, the fees start to overlap. Instead of this 5% here, we are now getting the Stripe portion. The Stripe portion is the same math that we did here. And the total comes out to $1.20, which is 24%. This was incredibly strategic of Google. They went out of their way to price this such that there is very little incentive for you to use an external payment processor. Sorry, I mixed up percentages and decimals throughout, made it more confusing. This is actual numbers. You can hopefully read this and understand it now. Sorry. Back to the numbers, though, because that's what we're here for. This was incredibly strategic of Google, specifically breaking out the difference between the in-app mandatory fee, regardless of what payment processor you're using, separate from their billing fee, which is much closer to market rate. It's actually a tiny bit below Stripe's rate. This was strategic. They wanted to incentivize you to keep using their billing and also continue collecting as much money as they can, even if you don't. Sorry, I forgot to change one of these others. Do you understand how absurd, but also how clever it is that Google managed to comply with the law, comply with the injunctions that were put on them, but still make it so that their solution is the best deal and the discount you're getting isn't really that meaningful? And remember, we assumed 15% here because we assumed that these were new installs. Old installs are still 20%, which makes this math even worse. I also think this diagram is incredibly dirty. This is assuming the developer is doing alternative billing in the UK, but they don't include the fees that the alternative billing providers would charge instead. They are hiding the fact that this is more expensive than this by literally just not showing the other bubble. They're releasing this slowly throughout the world on a staggered schedule. Their claim for this is that they need to make sure they have enough time to build the necessary technical infrastructure and enable a seamless transition for devs. What it actually means is this last part, ensuring alignment with local regulations. This is just because they have to hit deadlines for legal jurisdiction stuff against them. Oh, and of course, the ender, resolving disputes with Epic Games. With these updates, we have also resolved our dispute worldwide with Epic. No, this is not an also, this is the reason. We believe these changes will make for a stronger Android ecosystem with even more successful developers and higher quality apps and games available across more form factors for everyone. We look forward to our continued work with the developer community to build the next gen of digital experiences. Cool. How crazy is it that Epic has succeeded in their goals here of making Android and the president of the Android ecosystem have to drop this? Pretty nuts. And while, yes, they don't get to choose if this resolves the dispute with Epic or not, it seems like Tim Sweeney feels as though they did, and I'm assuming the courts will as well. Google's opening up Android all the way with robust support for competing stores, completing payments, and a better deal for all devs. So we've settled our disputes worldwide, thanks Google. Surprised he's not mad about the 20% still. But as I mentioned earlier, there is more to this story. This is the Keep Android Open initiative. In August of 2025, Google announced that as of September 2026, it will no longer be possible to develop apps for Android without first registering centrally with Google. The registration will involve paying a fee to Google, agreeing to their terms of service, providing government identification, uploading evidence of the developer's private signing key, and listing all current and future application identifiers. This is because Google, as always, is very paranoid about viruses and bad software being distributed on Android, malware, scamware, phishing, all of those things, which are much more common on Android than iOS. They have made a lot of improvement here, but the ability for anyone to just send an APK to somebody that's unsigned, that could be anything at all, is dangerous, and they want to protect from that. But at the same time, Android's an open source project, and developers should be able to write software for their devices without having to get some form of license or approval from external parties. Generally speaking, I would be in favor of legislation that allows me to purchase a piece of hardware and write my own software for it without having to go through all of this bullshit, especially in the case of things like lawnmowers, where you have to now pay crazy fees to companies like John Deere just to replace a part. So what does this policy change mean for our rights? You, the consumer, purchased your Android device believing in Google's promise that it was an open computing platform and that you could run whatever software you chose on it. That is a big part of why I bought an Android phone back in the day. Instead, you're getting an update that blocks this right. To be fair, you can install whatever software as long as the software is signed, but that is a change that is not something you understood when you purchased the phone. I would go further with this, where I don't think the average consumer understands the fact that when you buy an iPhone, you can only use apps that Apple specifically thinks are okay, and that you're paying a fee every time you do that. This, in my opinion, should be tested through actual conversations with users. Like, there should be a litmus test that is effectively taking 10 random Android users, asking them what their understanding is of what they can install on their phone, and doing effectively a common sense test, seeing what the common understanding is of these things so that they can work according to that. I would guarantee 99% of iPhone users don't realize that every app they purchase and every payment they make has 30% going to Apple. And I would guarantee they don't realize that they're not allowed to install things like game streaming services because Apple decided they don't like that category. Yes, the principle of least astonishment. Oh, that's actually a really good point about emulators. I hadn't thought about that. A lot of emulators are done anonymously, And these emulators are built anonymously in order to prevent potential legal action from being taken on the developers. But now you have to sign and provide government ID to sign and publish the app. It becomes significantly easier for a company like Sony or Nintendo to target the individual now. And developers can no longer develop apps and share them directly with friends, family, and community without first seeking Google's approval. You can't sideload an unsigned app anymore once this change goes through. And being able to sign it requires all of these things. Google does have a vague mention of an advanced flow that will supposedly let them continue installing apps that haven't been signed. Similar to when you install an app on macOS that's unsigned, you have to go hit that special settings button that's it's okay, I can do this, trust me. Seems like Android might have something like that, but according to the language of the description that they put out for this change, it seems like that might not be the case. We don't know until they push this. As I mentioned before, Google's desire here is not to be malicious or make money. They are seemingly really trying to do this just to make the platform safer because they are very upset about the amount of malware. And now with AI, it is easier than ever to produce a visually indistinguishable app from other real apps and then publish it when it's actually malware. Like making a fake bank app that looks just like your real bank app and getting that out has never been easier. And Google really wants to try and lock down to prevent that. So again, this is one of those cases where I actually empathize with both sides. On one hand, this is a huge change to Android and people who bought these phones expecting to install anything without having to sign it. Having that change sucks and almost certainly should be a thing they can opt out of carefully. On the other hand, Google is trying to prevent one of the biggest malware disasters in all of history, which is much bigger a risk now than it's ever been before. So I empathize with them for this too. There's one other interesting case going on with Google because Google also makes AI. So they make the operating system, they make hardware, they make the app store and the payment processor for it, and they make AI models, agents, search, and all of that are all integrated in the platform. That's a monopoly by every sense. And as such, the EU has ruled that they should be forced to allow competitors to have access to Android features for AI services. So I should be able to change when I hold the button for the voice mode, what triggers the voice mode. Is it Gemini or something else? Seems reasonable. I would really like to be able to use Siri, but instead of it being Siri, it'd be ChatGPT someday. But yeah, this seems reasonable. I'm always a little scared when these types of specific details are inked out by the law because they can have weird long-term consequences. But I guess T3 chat coming to Android, right? Right, nerds? Someday. I think that's all I have to say on this one. One last congrats to Tim Sweeney for winning this war and getting exactly what he wanted out of it. Cool to see Android trying at least to be a little more open than it has been in the past and going back to that original goal of being the open alternative to iOS. I think that's all I have to say about this one. What a journey this ride has been. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we're now at the end of the weird side effects of that Epic versus Apple and Epic versus Google case. I love these cases dearly. I've been invested in these now for over 5 years. But I think this might be the end for real. And if not, I am sorry if I have to rant about all this again. Let me know how y'all feel, and if you're going to go pick up a Pixel Fold of your own, I wouldn't recommend it. The folding apps just aren't really there yet as someone who tried really hard. It's a beautiful phone. The hardware is incredible, but the apps just, no, I don't. I'll be sticking with my iPhone, but I'm curious how y'all feel. Let me know in the comments, and until next time, peace, nerds.